In this video, we will discuss the meaning of statistics and have an introduction to data. So, statistics is a science that deals with the methods of collecting, organizing, and summarizing data in a way that valid conclusions can be drawn from them. It's sometimes referred to as a science of uncertainty. And one thing to note is that statistics investigations and analyses fall into two categories: descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. Descriptive statistics deals with processing the data without drawing inferences. For example, when we use tables and graphs to organize data. Whereas inferential statistics, sometimes referred to as inductive statistics, this is an actual scientific discipline that's concerned with developing mathematical tools to make forecasts and inferences. The main concern is to generalize from a sample to a population. But of course, when generalizing from a sample to a population, we risk making incorrect conclusions. Now, in statistics, we'll frequently hear the terms data and information. And we'd like to know, what is the difference between them? Well, there is none. So these are both the same. So we'll use these terms interchangeably. Now, when we're dealing with data, when we're dealing with it in terms of statistic, these are just the values for a variable from individual observations. Now, the individuals are just the objects described by a set of data. And the variable, this is some characteristic of an individual where the value may change from one individual to another. Now, when we're dealing with data, we have these different terms. For example, a population. A population is every individual of interest. A sample is just a group taken from the population. And a census is a survey of the entire population. And we'll also be discussing the difference between categorical and quantitative variables. So a categorical variable, this is one that places individuals into groups or categories, something such as the color of a shoe. Whereas a quantitative variable, this takes numerical values for which arithmetic operations such as adding and averaging can make sense. For example, the price of a stock or an SAT score. So we have two types of variables. We have categorical variables and numerical variables. Categorical variables are sometimes referred to as qualitative variables, and numerical variables are sometimes referred to as quantitative variables. Now, among the numerical variables, we have discrete variables. These are things that are countable, such as the number of dogs in a household. And we also have continuous variables. These are things that can be measured, such as the length of a desk. But where do we get data? So we can get data from observational studies where we observe individuals and measure the variables of interest, but we do not attempt to influence the responses. Now, a survey and observational study, they both seek to obtain information that would still be present. We just cannot necessarily see it. And another way we can get data is from an experiment. This is where we create an artificial situation and we collect information about the outcomes or responses. And experiments try to simulate reality, but in a controlled setting where we can simplify the data analysis by minimizing the possibility of other explanations. Now, one specific type of observational study is a survey. Now, this asks questions of the population or a sample. We remember, when it's from the entire population, it's called a census. Now, a survey gets information that already exists, but it's not readily observed. For example, people's opinions about their favorite soda. Now, a survey relies on the quality of the questions and, of course, the integrity of the person answering. We do have to trust that the person answering is answering truthfully. And when we get a survey, we use it to conclude something about the population. And then we'd like to know what is the difference between observational studies and experiments. Well, we've said that observational studies only get information, whereas we're trying to look for, in experiments, cause-effect relationships. So that's the main difference between the two. Now, some of the questions we'll explore as we go further into data are things such as, do we have enough information? Are our sample sizes large enough? How can we get more information if we need it? How can we summarize the information? How can we analyze the information? And how can we use this, most importantly, to make decisions? So it's important for us to develop a plan. So some of the things we have to consider is context. What is the reason for getting the data and what are we trying to show? Or what information do I need to work with it? So what types of things do we have to get information on? And then once we decide what we need information on, we need to know how can we get that information, how can we organize it, and then how can we look at it? For example, analyzing it in order to draw conclusions. So these are some of the questions that we'll discuss as we go further.